please join me in welcoming BGA President David Greising and Ambassador Rahm Emanuel to the stage.
Mr. Ambassador.
David.
Thank you for joining us.
Hey, thank you.
It is, have you ever gotten used to being called Mr. Ambassador?
You should hear what I'm called at home. So,
And I
know,
go ahead.
Not the ambassadors in the country, you're called Your Excellency. And I used to tell everybody in Chicago, you could tell somebody's old school because they would call the mayor Your Honor. So I don't think I've earned either one of those. So.
And before we get into the meat of this, I was thinking while we were talking about holding government accountable and this and that, and from our perspective, though, that's a really great thing. You've probably looked at press accountability from the other side. Is it a great thing that we're out there digging into all kinds of things, including going to court to get your emails, that sort of thing?
Well, when you ask for a spouse's email, the answer is no. When you ask, yeah, I mean, look, every one of us who are on the receiving end hate it, and then when you get out of it, you realize the value of it. That's the honest truth. I don't want to sit here and do this, but if I am proud of the fact, especially when you look at what the federal government's doing, that we took the Inspector General and put it in every agency and department and did exactly what it did. It does serve a purpose of not so much, yes, holding people accountable, but also showing all the warts, et cetera, in that effort. There are times, obviously, when you're on the receiving end, you think it's ridiculous and crazy. On the other hand, you go through the windshield and you realize the value of it. But one perspective from the outside that you don't get from the inside, so this is a little bit more, everybody weighs equities. You get to look at it without the equities. In a silo, you have to weigh all different type of equities when you're sitting on the other side of that perspective.
And I guess when you're mayor, you've got to do all that weighing, and you've got all these competing interests, and you've got to sort out.
You've noticed, yes.
Yeah, especially these days. So I wanted to start with, we've talked in my remarks and in some of the video about some of the issues facing the country. Given what's happening here in Chicago in particular, the government shutdown seems like it's like a distant story.
Well, not if you don't get a paycheck.
Right, exactly.
That's
right.
It kind of gets close to home.
Right, right. So the question I had for you was, what would a President Rahm Emanuel do to stop the government from being shut down?
Wait, can we go back to the Inspector General question? So look, let me not answer it that way, but I know what I would do as a chief of staff.
Okay.
There is actually a simple solution.
Okay.
Well, this is where you try to create win-win and try to get out of a box you're all in, which is the Republicans are asking for what is called a clean CR, meaning no amendment, fund the government for 7 weeks so we can finish. Okay. And the Democrats want health care. So you're going to have simultaneous votes, same day, same time, first we'll do the CR, and then we'll do the Democratic health care. You get your win, a clean CR, 1 hour and a half later, you're going to vote on the continuation of the support for the Obamacare, whatever the premium. And you can work it out right now. Basically, they're starting to work through, it's a year or 2-year extension, lower the income. There's a place, if you wanted to get to a yes, you could get to very quickly. That's what, if you wanted to get out of this, that's what I would do. I would say, this is not your question, I actually think the risk for the Democrats, and I'm a product of my experience, having gone through the 95, 96 Gingrich-driven shutdown, advising the Obama White House during the Cruz 2014 shutdown, that when you pull the pin, you hold the hand grenade. Because of the way President Trump has acted, et cetera, he's actually grabbed the hand grenade from the Democrats. So the downside for the Democrats, or the risk, has really been minimized because of the way the president acted, and you can see it in all the data. The second part is I think the Democrats have the better advantage on health care. Now, I personally would sharpen it, and I have as recently as today, and I've said this on TV, which is we are writing a $20 billion bailout check to Argentina. No questions asked. And 20 million Americans are going to lose their health care. It's great to be an Argentinian in Trump's world. You're getting $20 billion to bail out your peso, and 20 million Americans starting November 1 are going to get a 60% increase in their premiums. And I think that November 1, and what's really working here is a clock, those premium notices will start to come. And there's going to be pain felt, and you look at the distribution of ACA and people that are in the exchanges, they're overwhelmingly in Republican states and Republican districts. So that's what I think.
So I'm going to go to one more kind of national issue and then go to the city issues for a little bit, and then we'll broaden out again. And depending on timing, we might have a speed round at the end, just so you know what you've signed up for.
Is there anesthesia with this? Okay.
If you need it. Yeah. But Medicaid won't cover it. Yeah. So yeah. Okay.
There's a work requirement now, and I'm unemployed. So there.
But in any event, education, which is often a local issue. The decisions tend to be made locally. The government can drive big trends in education. Yeah. You, I don't know why exactly you wound up in Iowa giving a speech about education. That David Brooks in his column this morning kind of listed some of the ideas that you're throwing out there, focusing on high school, improving K-8, really trying to raise standards. And in fact, he pointed out in his column that you, not just because of your all-day kindergarten, but because of other changes, saw substantial increases in educational attainment. Pardon me? Okay, in educational attainment while you're
Looks like the Greek chorus is now lobbing questions before you get to your rapid round. Okay.
My question for you is education, because it is so local, is it a national issue, or how would
yes.
one? Okay, how so?
Okay, I feel like, there's this great quote by Henry Kissinger, does anybody have questions for my answers? So that side seems to like that a lot more than that side. All right, so look, two things that I care deeply about education. When I was studying, I was going to be an early childhood educator. Not that I recommend your kids with me at the early age. One is, without going through it, when I walked in as mayor, Secretary Bennett called Chicago the worst public school system in America. When we walked out, Janice Jackson and I, and Sean Reardon at Stanford called it the single best public school system, and our kids were beating 98% of the other parts of the country, not just other big cities. Now, did some good things, some bad things, learned a lot, et cetera, but overall, kids got, and David is here, who was chair of the board, better reading, math scores, better graduation, better college attendance, and all the metrics were up. Now, I don't think as a party you can be advocating equity and be comfortable that 2/3 of the kids in America cannot read or do math at grade level. It is unacceptable. You can either believe in equity, but you cannot be complicit and complacent about these test scores. Kids do not get a do-over. Second, Jimmy Carter creates the Department of Education. Bill Clinton does public school choice, teachers of excellence. President Obama does race to the top. George Bush does no leave child behind. Ronald Reagan does a nation at risk. You can take it all, and you have it's fits and starts, but it's no doubt over the arc of time, our kids' improvements in reading and writing, reading and math and other types of it grows, just no doubt. Today, we have the worst reading and math scores. I want you to think about this. Not that 1/3 accomplish, 2/3 cannot do grade level math and reading. Now, I don't know how this to me is you would have any governor or the president of the United States. You know more about Donald Trump's position on windmills than you do know his position on reading and math. And every other predecessor has outlined. Race to the top under President Obama, how much do you think it was, federal government money?
I have no idea. Yeah.
$5 billion. But it changed every school district and state just through $5
$5
billion.
million?
Yeah, it was originally 15.
That was the printing fee.
No, David, I don't want to get into, it was supposed to be
amazing.
15, but
Okay.
I know the congressional members that cut it down. Not that I have Alzheimer's or forgot that, but I know exactly who did it. But the point I'm making is, of course it's a national. We've had every president has led on this because it's essential to the country. Now, hold on, David, I'm just getting started.
Okay, yeah.
Number two, if you look at every great growth period in America's economy, land-grant colleges after Abraham Lincoln, before the war's over. You have high school universal education. You have the GI Bill. You have the Sputnik Challenge. You can also do the race to the top and go through also President Clinton, President Obama, President Bush's 43, all their efforts. This is insane, crazy to me that we have governors of both parties, a President of the United States, the House and Senate. Google, if you have Wi-Fi here. Find out what they've said. You know there's not a statement on the White House webpage. Like as if it doesn't matter. And I think this is insane, crazy.
So let's talk. Let's take it very local to your term as mayor. The most memorable. I mean, all-day kindergarten was a signature program, but also
all-day pre-K also.
Thank you. But the other, kind of legacy was your closure of the 50 schools. Mm-hmm. And the record since then is the student population's down by about 30%. The school closures were disproportionately, 90-some people affected were in black neighborhoods. There was quite a lot of criticism then, and it remains, that it may have been that schools needed to close, but the way it was done was not effective. And let me, you've been asked that question a fair amount. I'd be interested in your answer, but I'd like to also throw it forward. I'd like to throw it forward. Yeah,
really
yeah.
appreciate
That's the
that.
point of questions, isn't it? But I want to throw it forward too by adding to that there's a moratorium right now on school closures, and in 2027 that moratorium expires. You know what's going on here pretty well. I'm curious your thoughts as to what needs to happen in 27.
Look, first of all, I mean, you want to sit there. It's not just kindergarten and pre-K, but we added 4 years to a child's education. It's the largest increase any time, anywhere, by any city ever in the United States of America. And so the length of day and the length of year, plus kindergarten and pre-K, the city of Chicago added more time to a child's education, the equivalent to 4 years, than any city anywhere in the United States. Now, I did right things and wrong things. There's a lot of things I would have done different. But I know what the arc is where I walked in and where I walked out, and not just by metrics. And not just me. I did it with Dr. Janice Jackson, the school board, as I said, David's here, who's also the chair of it. There are things that I would have done different, et cetera. But as it relates to that, and let me just say one thing, because it's about leadership. My life would have been a hell of a lot easier if I had never done that. I wouldn't have had teachers in front of my kids' schools holding up signs, "Your dad sucks." You laugh. Try being a father to a child that has that. My life would have been easier. If you want somebody who's only going to do easy things, save their political capital, don't vote for me. I'm not your guy. I could have easily left kids in failure. They had been there before I got there. And the school district's population was shrinking before I came. It didn't start when I got there, David. Third, those kids not only went to better schools, the scores improved, but I am not the person that sits there and say, how can I husband my political capital, even if it means kids are going to be sitting year in and year out in failure. Lastly, what you didn't mention, every mayor 7 before I got there. Richard J. Daley, Harold Washington, Jane Byrne, Mike Blandick, Richard M. Daley, all asked for the state to rewrite school financing. Never had happened. We got a Republican governor to increase the funding for the Chicago Public Schools. For the first time ever, Chicago kids were treated as first-class citizens in their state, not second-class citizens.
Yeah.
First time in, I know you, yeah? Say that a little louder.
No, yeah.
No, wait a second. So certain decisions, this is what I mean by silo. Certain decisions don't sit in a box. Mm-hmm. They have ramifications and implications. Now, again, as I said, there's a whole host of things we did. First city ever create free community college. If you got to be average, 20,000 kids in Chicago went to community college for free. Had not existed before. So I see it, and there's things that we did afterwards that we learned from that. But the challenge we have today, not just here, you can also see this around the country, that parents now are doing more homeschooling, sending kids to parochial and private schools, and abandoning public schools. And that's not a good thing. That was not happening at the end.
Right.
So I look at this, and when I did what I did, we put a moratorium in place for 5 years. Chicago leaders, you're going to have an elected school board. They'll make a decision on how they want to do it and how they want to apply resources. But again, I want to repeat, my life would have been easier if I've never done that. Those kids' lives would have been miserable.
Right.
And leadership is not about husbanding political capital. It's about making a decision. And I decided to run for mayor. The first time I decided was to improve the public school system. And we did it.
So you mentioned state funding. Obviously, the mayor and a past school board president went down to Springfield, demanded $1 billion.
How's that going?
That hasn't gone real well. But there's also some discussion that the finances of the system are so bad that the state ought to take over the Chicago Public Schools. Is that something worth discussing? Would it improve matters at all, or would
Do you think I'm going to touch that with a 10-foot pole?
You got to do the tough stuff. You got to do the tough stuff.
I don't hold the position there.
Okay.
I appreciate. First of all, let me say this: decisions you make. The way I say it is, why was it that we got an increase in the public state funding of public education? John Cullichan is here, was an instrumental player in there, because we finally showed that the city was willing to do things that had been talked about for years and never did. My guess is the request now, I don't know it, I'm not intimately involved in it like I was before, is the state is going to do things or not do things based on their confidence about fundamental change. There was fundamental change,
right,
both on the academic level, the administration level. By way of example, there was a change in the past as it related to pensions. People forget this. You remember we dealt with 2 contracts. There was a year we didn't work, the teachers continued to work without a contract, but we got the pension reform, and the state finally started to contribute to the Chicago Teachers Pension Fund. Hadn't existed before. We got that in the 2015. So if you make changes, you can give people confidence that it's not good money after bad, but good money after improvement. So I'm not going to comment on that $1 billion, but you got to make you got to show the leadership to do the right things.
Well, speaking
and
of
I'm not sure the state taking over solves everything, but I don't know.
Right. Okay. Speaking of pension reform, that, if I'm not mistaken, that's the pension reform that the Illinois courts ultimately rejected.
No.
Okay.
It was a 3-way handshake.
Okay.
State did X. Teachers, all new teachers went to the full 9%, which had not existed before. It was 2%. It was supposed to be a 1-year 2%, and it ended up being a 30-year plus. And the city contributed. It was a 3-way handshake, and it stabilized the teacher's pension.
So I wanted to ask on pension reform. Late in your term as mayor, you called for a constitutional amendment on Illinois pensions, an Illinois constitutional amendment on pensions. I think the presumption was that might mean some reduction in benefits, which currently is prohibited under the Constitution. Do you still believe that that is necessary or not?
Look, this is not for me to sit here and try to go through all my memory banks of everything I said or did,
Right, right.
But I do appreciate the road down memory lane together. So let me say it this way, as I said in that speech. And we did 7 reforms of pensions, of which every one of them passed the Springfield legislature bipartisan. So 1 a year. My view is the automatic 3%, there's nothing progressive about automatically increasing compounded 3% and negotiating a 1% or 1.5% pay increase for a current worker. It's not progressive politics. If you believe in, and I'm for a retirement, you earned it, etc. But we are on an unsustainable path at that time I was saying as a city, where you're doing something compounded at 3%, and yet in the choices you make for libraries, parks, transportation, somebody that worked aggressively at getting federal money, etc. This is not a sustainable model, and there's nothing progressive about one person who's retired getting 3% compounded, and a current worker and family getting 1.5% or whatever you negotiate. It's just not progressive politics, and you got to be upfront about it. And I'm not trying to hurt anybody. I'm just trying to have a city that has stable finances so you can encourage. 7 years in a row, Chicago was the #1 city for corporate relocations and #1 city for foreign direct investment. If you don't have a growth strategy of which stable finances, are a piece of that, you're going to get hurt. And you can either redistribute, you can go backwards and shrink, or you can grow. I'm for growth.
Right.
There was in this great room of smart people, there was a singular applause for growth.
Another thing on the minds.
I'm glad you didn't
right.
applaud for shrinking.
Yeah,
so thank you.
And I hear what you're saying on memory lane, but we have a lot of memories of your term as mayor. As somebody who covered you, you're a memorable person to cover and make things more interesting when you're here in this city.
Well, thank you, David.
Yeah.
I know that was so heartfelt.
So the
warmth, you want to save that for Valentine's and leave it as a voicemail or something?
The other thing, when you talk about corporate relocation, I don't know if you remember, but I spent a year at World Business Chicago when I was between jobs, and I was actually worked for you at one point, indirectly, right? Mm-hmm. And so I remember the recruiting when we worked on recruiting companies to Chicago. It was a lot about culture. It was a lot about the business, and it was a lot about public safety. And it
was about the 5 T's: talent, training, transportation, technology, and transparency.
Okay.
That was that.
Maybe that was those days.
Obviously, you must have worked at World Business Chicago and not got the memo. You weren't on the distribution list.
I was technically a consultant, but in any event, public safety is clearly on people's minds today. It's the thing we get asked a lot about. I'm sure people working in the city do. You, at one point after the Laquan McDonald murder, you gave a speech about kind of the thin blue line and the code of silence, and said it was time to really reckon with this. There's been questions about how you handled the Laquan McDonald, the videotape in particular, and settling with the family. I'd be curious kind of why you didn't see the videotape, just a narrow question, but the broader question is, we're years into a consent decree, have seemed to make little progress. I'd be curious your take on, are you seeing any signs that the code of silence and some of the other things that have been part of policing in Chicago, are we making any progress? And if not, maybe do consent decrees work, or do they perhaps not really work?
No, first of all, I'm not that close to tell you about the consent decree working or not. That's what I used to do every day. I'm not going to comment on it because I'm not that close to it. I don't have current information, etc. Do they work? yes, they work, and they're necessary. I mean, it's just one person. After I got reelected, I replaced the police board, we did a blue ribbon commission. I'd be honest, I thought I had addressed, and I said this when I got confirmed at the Senate, I said it many times before, afterwards, I thought I had addressed and fixed the problem, and the depth of both on the law, the oversight, the culture was much more severe than I understood and appreciated, and that's on me. I was mayor, and that's what I said to the public at the time when I made the comment to the city council. You know, by way of reference, Laquan's uncle, Pastor Hunter, is on the west side. I'm going to be doing an event with him in a couple weeks. We text and call each other all the time. When I was ambassador, he continued to do it. And I do think consent decree works. But the idea that you would focus on that is if that's all about public safety. There's after-school funding. There's summer jobs. There's mentoring programs. There's increasing a police department with proper community police training. One of the things I've thought about afterwards, we talk about the superintendent, we talk about training. Probably the most important position to see not only reform through, but public safety through, and doing that in balance is the sergeant. One of the things that we did was reduce, I think, I'm doing this by memory, so the numbers won't be right, but I think we had 12 officers per one sergeant, and we reduced it from 12 to 1 to 8 to 1. And the ability to have that kind of oversight, direct leadership, and the better training for the sergeants, probably more important than just who's the superintendent, how many officers you have. That is a position that's central both to the reform and the effectiveness of also not losing anything on the public safety side in that effort. So that's how I kind of, is it important? Yes, it's very important. As you know, before I was mayor, I think there were 6 efforts at police reform. My guess is this one is being more successful. Again, I don't have the data like I used to have.
Okay, so let's go to some national issues. With regard to education, you've said something about the Democratic Party's been too busy arguing about pronouns when kids in school don't even know what a pronoun is. You've also added another comparison of the party's been so busy talking about these kind of social issues and not kitchen table issues. In doing so, you appeared on Megyn Kelly's show, and you got a lot of attention for some comments about the fact that, in your view, a person is born a man or a woman, and I think, and please correct me if I put in this wrong, kind of stay that way. You have a record in this area of LGBTQ that's been pretty strong. You've won awards from groups like this. You helped fund Center on Halstead when you were a congressman. You had transgender health care for people when you were mayor. Your record has been strong. Why did you say that in the current political context? And is that what you believe?
So
yeah.
Here's, you got like 7 questions, so let me try to answer
right.
all 4 of them, okay? Look, one is as it relates to cultural issues on schools. Democrats brought cultural wars to the classroom. There were school districts arguing about whether a school, like in San Francisco, could be named after Abraham Lincoln. We didn't care whether a kid could tell you why Abraham Lincoln was a giant, but we worried about the name on the school. We worried about bathroom and locker room access, and we never worried about the classroom excellence. And I said that, and I believe that. I think we lost the plot. And I think, and I say this now also both on the policy side and political level, from Jimmy Carter to Barack Obama, Democrats had a 20-point advantage on education. We're now down 5 negative against Republicans. You're a very smart person.
Thank you.
Okay. What was Joe Biden and Kamala Harris's education policy? I told you what Race to the Top was for Barack Obama, public school choice and teachers of excellence for Bill Clinton, Department of Education for Jimmy Carter. What was it?
I think more of the same.
No, closing charter schools and closing them during COVID.
Oh, okay.
And that is,
right.
and we brought cultural wars into the classroom, and we lost. Why do you send a child to school? Now look, when I was mayor in 2016, we dealt with bathroom access,
Right.
but we never lost focus on reading scores, math scores, and graduation rates. I'm for acceptance. I think it's not the responsibility to be an advocate. And I continue to believe when I was ambassador, and trans people work there. I think the best and most respectful thing for you to do is, we're here to serve the United States interests and advance our national security interests. Let's get to work. And that was exactly the culture we created. And I created it as ambassador. My view is whatever you want to do, but life, I'm totally in there in acceptance. It is not the primary responsibility when we're the United States ambassador. You were here working the embassy, and without talking about what their job was, I don't want to get them in trouble right now. They did their job and they couldn't be happier. Okay, now the second thing is not just Halsted Street Center, we also made phone calls and passed marriage equality in Illinois.
Right.
And one of the first things I did is also as mayor was make sure that we had partner benefits when we didn't have marriage equality. And I think it's the right thing to do. But don't also lose sight of the fact that in an election, and politics matters, this gets back to my point about equities, politics matters if you're trying to win an election. And that is, we got on a whole set of issues perceived as a party on what are secondary issues to other people as primary to us, when people could not pay bills. Their kids were making 3 times they made when they came out of school, and they're still living in the basement. Their healthcare premiums are going up 15%. They're taking money out of their 401k to backfill a paycheck, and their inability to save for their own children's education. And we were off on a set of issues that were not primary to people whose backs were against the wall. The reason you vote for Democrats is because when your back's against the wall, we show up and help you. And we were not there. And that's my view.
Thank you. So
and if you want somebody else to give you talking points, invite them next year to sit here.
Right.
I'm not going to give you talking points.
So, let's talk about.
No, because in 2024, against Donald Trump, winning an election would not have troops on the city of Chicago's streets. Winning an election would not have you think windmills create cancer, but would actually have you having a national conference on how to solve reading and math scores. And I think winning elections have consequences, to quote President Obama.
It does, and
well, good. Now we have agreement.
So the New York Times had a really great story a few weeks ago, pointing out that in the 30 states where people register by party, the Democrats have lost ground in every single one of them in terms of party registration.
Yeah.
This probably, you're seeing that, no doubt, and maybe that's why you're trying to turn your party where you're trying to pull your party. My question is, given what you did at DCCC when you took back the House, you were the architect of that, what needs to happen on the ground for the Democratic Party to reverse those registration trends, to change the national conversation, and to reestablish itself against what they're fighting, because what the Republicans are doing is working.
Well, I'm not sure there was.
I mean, it's working politically.
I think it's actually not what the Republicans are doing, it's what the Democrats aren't doing, is my view.
Okay.
And you can go do research, and I'm as much a nerd about taking data, but look, let me give you one fact. In 1950, 50% of the people who were 30 or younger were married and owned a home. In 2025, it's only 12%. The American dream is unaffordable. It's inaccessible. And as Democrats, that's got to be unacceptable to us. The idea that you cannot buy a home, you cannot save for your retirement, you cannot save for your kids' education, and you live one illness away from going to the poorhouse. That is where America lives, not just in the registration numbers. But for 90% of America, they're living through a recession, or damn near close to one. 3 weeks ago, Bloomberg had a story that people making $250,000 or above are now 50% of all consumer spend. It's an inverse pyramid. This is not a sustainable model. People are living where what used to be something you strived till you got to, the American dream's turned into a nightmare.
But why is this message that you're articulating not getting through?
Well, first of all, I'm just a skinny little Jewish kid articulating it. But that's what I think Democrats have to focus on.
Okay.
And I think getting caught up on a whole set of issues that are not primary to where people live their lives. And also, let me say this, not just as consumers. I happen to think we, as I wrote in this piece on education about the agenda, talk to them as parents about where their kids are. I know the kitchen table is not just where you pay bills. You talk about social media, you talk about your kids' friends, you talk about what's going or not going on in school, you say what's happening on TikTok, you talk to your kids about what they're going to do. There's a whole host of things that we were not part of that conversation. And to me, now again, I'm a student of both President Obama, President Clinton. Also, and I wrote this before for the Washington Post, and it's my view is, look, President Obama dealt with the issue of parenting and fatherhood and father rights, his own pastor. President Clinton dealt with, the issues, I mean, he's known as Sister Soldier, but a whole set of cultural issues on his area, whether it was coming after Jimmy Carter, Walter Mondale, Michael Dukakis. People forget this. The number one issue that Bill Clinton advertised, 40%, almost half of his advertising, end welfare as we know it. John Kennedy had to go to Texas to say that I will not be a Catholic president that takes direction from the Pope, but I'll be the president of the United States who happens to be Catholic. So we, as a party, were seen culturally in the last 4 years off on a tangent and missing from the conversation of both middle-class economics and middle-class values and espousing those. And it doesn't mean abandoning principles, it doesn't mean saying something, but that to me is what we have to do. Now I also, as you talk about registration, the party, I just has some things that I think are wrong in the way they not only approach that, but they deal with a set of politics in and around identity when it's proven not to work, and B, more importantly, if you do identity politics, the other side gets to do identity politics. And I don't know if you know this, but there's more identity there than there is here.
Right.
And so that's not the way to do politics.
Okay, so we've got time for one more question, and I'd be remiss, I think, if I didn't mention the biggest global story this week of the Gaza ceasefire. And I wanted to ask, first of all, as somebody who's been known to be sort of a pretty hard-driving deal maker, how do you assess the way that President Trump did this? It said that he both was threatening Bibi Netanyahu and threatening Gaza, or the Hamas, and also sort of implying to Qatar, well, I guess he gave Qatar support if they did this deal. How do you assess his deal-making skills? But more to and the bigger question is does this indicate that at some point down the road, a Hamas, Israel peace treaty of some sort might be possible?
No. So, I have no problem. The president did a good job and deserves credit. Ending a war, bringing home the hostages, ending the violence in Gaza and what was happening in Gaza and all the violence there, and 67,000 people dying. Yeah, so he gets an A, but America gets an A. Because unlike China, unlike Russia, unlike Europe, once again, the President of the United States showed that when it comes to the indispensable power in the world, it's the United States of America. And that is good for us. And it will not stay in the region. Around the world, that capital gets exported. That's good. Third, I think it's underestimated. I give a lot of shout out to the Israeli public and the Palestinian people in Gaza. They put pressure on their respective leaders who didn't want to do this. They did it. Fourth, I say this having gone through Oslo, Y Plantation, Camp David, with President Clinton, stuff with President Obama. You don't remember, you didn't say this, but in 2009, Prime Minister Netanyahu called me publicly a self-hating Jew.
Yeah.
And it's very hard to be a self-hating Jew when your name is Rahm Emanuel. I didn't need a war to know where I thought about Bibi Netanyahu. I've been dealing with him since 1997 in the Y plantation. I give the president credit for finally pushing Bibi in a way that had not happened. Now, the one thing I know about the Middle East, not just having grown up there, but having worked it, when you have a moment like this, it is not the last paragraph of this. It's the first paragraph of this. I don't know what this is. If the White House stays involved, if the White House pushes this, uses this momentum, this ball can go here. If it loses interest, you'll have this, and I mean, there's a lot of work to be done in rebuilding Gaza, having a different governance, a different economic model. So I don't know the answer, but I know this, what happened now, is the beginning of something, not the end of something. Number 3, I'm not done. What's interesting to me, and I don't mean, this is a compliment. President Trump has a unique capacity, like a shark, to smell vulnerability and then use it. And that's just assessing a situation. And he knew right when, not right, but when Prime Minister Netanyahu made the stupid mistake to bomb Qatar, he had him, grabbed him. Now, nobody can write this, and I know there's some journalists in the room because I'm writing it as my next column. I think you're coming on the 4-year anniversary of the war in Ukraine. I think Putin is an absolute loser. And I don't think anybody's assessed. He didn't want NATO going east. He's now got, in Finland, 800-mile border with NATO. Never had it. Azerbaijan and Armenia signed a peace treaty, which is his near border, in the West Wing, not in Moscow. The Arabs he had a big conference between Moscow and the Arab and Gulf world. They canceled. His intelligence was wrong on Syria. His intelligence was wrong on Ukraine. He's losing the empire in Africa. He lost Syria. He's 10 times the size of Ukraine, and in 4 years, he's got maybe 18% of it. He's lost 1 million people. His loss record in Ukraine is overwhelming. Now, for a president of the United States who can smell vulnerability, that's a very vulnerable guy. And why he doesn't squeeze him in the same way he just did Bibi Netanyahu, I don't understand. And this war could end. And there, as somebody who wrote this January, 8 months ago, now that he can get a Nobel Peace Prize for.
Well,
what do you think the over-under of, I'm just taking this over now.
Go ahead.
What do you think the over-under was when Trump woke up and found out that the woman in Venezuela got the Nobel?
Yeah.
Let me say this. I wouldn't want to be in the room, but definitely would like to have a little tape
absolutely.
and a video of that.
So,
what staff person
Right.
says, Jimmy, you're going to take the message into the President of the United States. Why don't you tell him you lost again to another woman that's an advocate for democracy?
Right, absolutely.
Like, good morning,
So-
do you take cream in your coffee, Mr. President? Oh, I would love to do
That's
that,
fine.
sucker, man.
So
That's what the chief of staff is for.
I guess you would know, right?
I used to be 6'2".
So what you said about Putin's really interesting. You know, she up close.
I can't wait to see one of these
Yeah.
Chicago columnists write this as their new idea.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I got you all in this room.
Yeah. So let's last question here, because what you all said about Putin is really interesting. You know Xi up close and personal. You were positioned in Tokyo by Joe Biden to keep an eye on Xi. What is your assessment of Xi and what the President of the United States ought to be doing vis-a-vis China?
Oh, this is like a order dinner, man. I mean, this is a long, I don't want to. So here's my assessment. I articulated this to Tony Blinken when I worked. We are going to isolate the isolator. China's entire strategy is to take country A, Japan, Korea, Australia, Philippines, and isolate them, and then use military, political, economic coercion to break their will and their sovereignty. And through the Quad, Australia, Japan, India, the United States, through the trilaterals we did with South Korea and the Philippines, between Japan, United States, etc., we're going to isolate the isolator. And China and Xi screamed about it, and they knew exactly what we had done. I think the president has allowed China to get out of the box we put them in, and that they put themselves in, and we took advantage of that strategic opportunity, and has allowed China to not only get out of that box, but to be seen as less as a nefarious and more as a benign player, which they are not. Now, I don't fault them for doing what they're doing for themselves, and I'll say this as a conclusion because it's a longer conversation about China. I loved being ambassador, loved the new challenge I had, learned a lot about the region, Japan, about China, about the Indo-Pacific. But being away from America, 8,000 miles, 12 hours, I learned a lot about America, good, bad, and ugly. And nothing China does scares me. Nothing. It's what we are not doing here that scares the crap out of me. And this idea, and Xi said this, as long as America stays divided, we got a lot of running room. The idea that you've declared American cities as where you do military practice and training. The idea that you pit one part of America and another, and you sit at a funeral and you say, I hate them. The President of the United States goes to Iowa and says, Democrats hate America. I have 2 kids in the armed forces. Pretty funny way to show your hate. I think this is horrible. We don't have a person to waste, a day to waste, in not only bringing the country together, but building a future. And we are playing China's game for them. And as somebody that participates in partisan politics, etc., and I think about how far we've gone. So a seminal moment, my tenure in life, was being with President Clinton when Oklahoma was bombed, Oklahoma City. 4 days later, he goes there, speaks at the state fairgrounds. So I went and Googled this, and I could be wrong, meaning I just Googled it, so I don't know if I Googled it comprehensively. None of the kids were home, so I can't tell you if I did it right. You know, nobody reported that he went to, quote unquote, a red state. Today, if a leader goes somewhere, and this is not because of Trump, we say that's a red state. Or when George Bush on 9/11 went to New York, nobody said, oh, he's going to a city that didn't vote for him. And remember, there were a lot of questions for 6 months whether he was a legitimate president given the Supreme Court had to make him president. Our politics has become a hunger game. We put Braveheart paint on. A president goes somewhere, he says, oh, that's a blue state. And I'm sorry, I'm putting this at the doorstep of the guy, as I said about President Trump. The office comes with a bully pulpit, and he's all bully and no pulpit. During the government shutdown, I'm going to cancel these blue departments, or I'm going to cancel projects in Chicago, the Red Line, or in New York, the tunnel. Pitting American against American is not going to prepare us to deal with a critical threat. And I say this having studied this. Xi makes a decision, he comes to power in 2012, that America is not a strategic competitor. They are a strategic adversary. And we are not preparing for that challenge with somebody who views us as an adversary.
Interesting. So it sounds like we're going to need a good president next time around.
We're going to need...
Yeah. So who do you think the 3 leading candidates for the Democratic nomination will be for 2028?
They're all booked for next year.
Okay, Rahm Emanuel, thank you.
Is that your wraparound? Are we done now? Okay. Thanks, man.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you for coming today. Thank you for your attention. Thank you for your support. We'll see you next year. Oh, and we have a program, when is it? Tomorrow? Next week. Yeah.